Welcome to our video on conducting virtual meetings and presentations with buyers online. This video forms part of a suite of videos on rebooting international B2B sales. As I'm focusing on online meetings with buyers, a good partner video with this is Fáilte Ireland's video on reshaping your B2B saleable experience for international buyers and also pricing and contracting for international B2B. The skills you learn today will be invaluable in any online selling situation, whether you're selling one-to-one or doing a live product webinar where you are selling with other businesses. What we're going to cover over the next 15 minutes or so are key skills to selling in a virtual environment, structuring a presentation so that it is really different, memorable, and convincing, how to create engagement online as you present your pitch, and of course, the most important, which is follow-up. Virtual meetings are very, very different from face-to-face meetings. Our biggest challenge is to gain the attention of the buyer. There are so many distractions. The buyer, for example, might have several devices open. While many salespeople bemoan the challenge of online sales, we can actually take a different attitude. Our goal must be to stand out from the competitor by becoming a master at online selling techniques. So let's get started. We know from research that in online presentations, buyers forget most of our message, even when presentations are really well designed. And the brain is fallible. Buyers don't automatically remember the most important part of our message. So we need to make sure that our key message gets through, even if they only remember 10% of our presentation. So think of a typical sales agenda we might create for an online sales meeting. Now put the challenge of distractions, message overload, and even tiredness on top of that agenda. So you can see the risk to our key message. Let's flip that agenda and call it my 10% attention agenda. I think this is a good example of a message cutting through. In just one compelling picture and a few lines, we really understand what this company is about. And we really would love to be there, wouldn't we? For tips on creating great images, see our video, Imagery that Engages and Sells, and the accompanying top tips that go with that suite of supports. So back to this task of finding out what we want to be remembered for. I know from working with companies in training workshops that quite often when we're under pressure, we're inclined to talk about me and my stuff rather than focusing on the outcomes we create for the buyer. So what do you think the buyer is more interested in hearing about? So to win in virtual meetings, we have to consider our presentations and we cannot show up with the usual PowerPoint presentation. We need to take control so that our key message gets through, and we have 4 levers to do this. Let me show you how easy it is to guide the buyer's perception of our presentation. After the presentation, what do you want to be remembered for? This is your core message. So to get that message through, we actually need to reduce our content and use the slide deck to emphasize just 3 or 4 key ideas. Don't be tempted to overload the buyer's brain. The more you add in, the more they forget. When bringing the buyer through your slide deck, use color to draw attention to a specific part of a slide. For example, when you're introducing your location with a map of Ireland, you can use color to get the message across quickly and easily. You can highlight your location, access routes, and where you are in relation to a nearby iconic attraction, such as the Rock of Cashel. And then you can fade away the rest of the map. This helps guide the buyer's eye movement, and it also makes it less tiring for the buyer. As you tell your story, you can also enlarge elements to focus the buyer's attention where you want it to be. And PowerPoint animation can be used to guide the buyer's attention. Here, I'm giving an example of how a pub might emphasize its strategy for ensuring customer safety. So you can use these 4 simple levers to guide your buyer's attention and focus. So now it's time to prep your pitch. Let's think a little bit about first impressions online. The quality of sound is the most important factor in your virtual meeting. Just to remember what it's like when we're on a meeting and somebody's sound quality isn't good. They lose authority, they lose presence, and it's impossible to proceed with the meeting. So check your software in advance and make sure you've got the bandwidth so that your sound quality is good. Use a mic to give yourself the best chance of being heard and to cut out any background sounds. Or you can simply use earpods. They will help to improve the quality of the sound. The next thing to get right is the framing and lighting for your call. If you sit with the key source of light behind you, you'll appear as a silhouette. Place your laptop at eye level because otherwise you're going to be looking down on your buyer and you really don't want that. When framing, it's ideal to be about 3 feet away from the camera to give a little headroom and to frame the shoulders well. Consider your background. Can you include an image or your brand logo, as Zoom founder Eric Wan is doing in this picture? Background has now become more important than the way we are dressed in virtual calls. You can consider presenting an attractive image of your property or destination as a backdrop, but you have to be very careful if you're doing this because you need very, very strong broadband. For good eye contact, a good trick is to place the image of the buyer directly underneath your camera so that you're always looking straight at them. Eliminate all distractions, such as your mobile phone, and keep a check on your mic and video settings. You don't want to find that your best points have been delivered while you're muted. And most of all, learn the art of the pause. Slow down the pace of your presentation by allowing short pauses. You do this for 2 reasons. There's often a time lag in international calls. And secondly, you want to invite questions and interaction. In general, slow down your speech and make sure you speak clearly and distinctly. Choose words that are easily understood. Fáilte Ireland has developed excellent resources to support you in your international sales. Please check out Maximising Sales Opportunities during Virtual Mehel. This video outlines 12 steps to help you to make a successful verbal pitch. There are also excellent guidelines and tips, including sample emails that you can use. Now, let's think about meeting preparation. Let's set out to succeed in even the busiest environment. Imagine you're pitching online at a Fáilte Ireland event where buyers are given 10 minutes per meeting. You're going in to meet a buyer who's already had 4 to 5 successful online pitches. They were all good, and now how are you going to stand out? Thorough homework is going to be your most important weapon. It's great starter fuel to a meeting. Ask a powerful question that will surprise and interest the buyer. For example, many years ago, I interviewed the head of Xerox sales, and she used to kick off meetings with a powerful question. And her question was, how much are you spending on documentation management? And of course, the buyer didn't know the answer, but it created a really positive space for her to be able to talk about how much the buyer actually was spending on documentation management and how she could save that buyer some money. So you can see that that's an orientation towards the buyer's needs rather than Xerox. So you might also think of showing something physical or underscoring your key message by an unusual photo. Before you start your pitch, you want to create space around your meeting to separate your meeting from the ones that have gone before and the ones that will come afterwards. Now that you've got the buyer's attention, you want to keep it. So let's look at how you can do this through goals, knowledge, and building trust. When you're addressing the buyer's goals, you will always have their attention. Your questions are helping to uncover the buyer's priorities. You want to understand the emotions of the buyer and how they're driving buyers' decisions. Right now, they're likely to be around the topic of assurance and particularly customer safety. Look at your slide deck. Does it allow for flexibility when you're discussing buyers' goals, or is it too rigid? Your preparation will enable you to have a much higher level of dialogue with the buyer. You won't have to waste time asking questions about things you should already know. Instead, you can use appreciative inquiry technique. You can ask positive questions to understand your buyer's needs and desires. And if you can make it easier for the buyer to talk to you, that's always good. Building trust is harder without a usual face-to-face connection. Online, you can build trust by showing warmth and interest. You're pacing, signposting where you're going in your presentation, and checking in with the buyer. Is this of interest to you? Is there anything else you'd like me to discuss in more detail? Make it a dialogue. So we want to fit in and stand out. We want to fit in by showing that we're a very reliable and trustworthy organization to work with. But we also want to stand out, don't we? We want what we offer to be special and memorable. Cozy Farm is a super example of that. Cozy Farm, you can see quite clearly, is a family farm, and that's something that's very desirable for sure. But the reason it stands out is the extraordinary range of experiences you can have on this farm. And this is very, very easily communicated in this image I'm showing you. So we want to think about a number of key elements that should be in any presentation. First of all, we need to root our presentation. That is discussing who we are and where we're located for the buyer. That's important. And we want to talk about as well the signature brand that is relevant for us. And then we want to fit in with our destination and part of that wider experience for the buyer. It's also important to provide reassurance regarding the health and safety of guests and the initiatives that you've taken to ensure it's your most important priority. When presenting in an online situation, we have two situations, one-to-one or one-to-many. In our one-to-one engagement, we want to create a dialogue. We want to also create a new energy around our meetings to overcome the distractions and the tiredness of the buyer. And we also want to establish the buyer's priorities before making our own presentation. And finally, we want to create that assurance around health and safety. In the one-to-many context, we're part of a wider destination pitch. So we're presenting in that context of that wider destination and the complementary experiences that the buyer may have and that wider, broader geography. So we start with our own offering and then we widen it out to talk about the destination and the other attractions. So to summarize then, we want to create rapport because to sell is human. So we really do need to make that connection before we make our pitch. We need to establish the buyer's needs. And I really would like to encourage you to spend time here to show you've done your research and also to get the whole pace right for the dialogue. Listen carefully and ask positive questions. And then you're ready. Then you're ready to link your offer to the client's interests. And you can deal then with objections and agree outcomes. And that's very, very important to the final part of what we want to talk about today. And that is, of course, the follow-up. Research done by AUMA, and AUMA is the German organization for leading international trade shows. Their research found that 80% of firms that attend trade shows do not do sufficient follow-up afterwards. So make sure you're not in that group. When you're wrapping up your meetings, you need to work towards a reason to follow up after the call. Ideally, you've created interest in your offering and your follow-up will provide the buyer with specific information that you've agreed to provide. However, if you haven't got to that point in your conversation, look to keep the lead warm by getting permission to send updates on your destination. That is a way for you to keep the conversation open afterwards. And the good news is that we have prepared guidelines for you on how to conduct your follow-up after the meeting and follow-up email templates and so on. Let me remind you of the key ideas from this video. Clarify your 10%. What do you want to be remembered for? That's very important. Make it easy for the buyer to pay attention using the 4 levers. Use powerful questions when pitching. Create assurance by conveying your trustworthiness. And address the COVID-19 concerns openly. Don't wait to be asked. And finally, and most importantly, follow up to win the business. Your persistence is going to be so important. Guidelines to support this video are located here on the Fáilte Ireland website. Please find the full suite of supports that relate to this video under Rebooting International B2B Business. Thank you for watching today, and I hope you find this useful.